So the ongoing battle for actors' rights to earn royalties from their work has finally made it, or rather made some headway. Parliament has agreed to hear oral submissions from actors regarding amendments to the Performance Protection Act and the Copyright Act. Now, this has raised hopes for the end of the trend of actors dying poor, if you like. The South African Guild of Actors has fought tirelessly to actually get here. Its chair, Devnarain, joins us now via our video link to help us reflect on the significance of where we are. In some respects, Jack, it's great to see you, by the way. Thanks for making time for the AM report. This is being described as a milestone, but as a start, help us place the significance of this development in the context of the protracted battle to try to get actors what's due to them.
South African actors do not yet, in 2021, have a right to earn royalties. Kenya has already approved that right. Kenyan actors are earning royalties amongst other African countries, the rest of the world, from North to South America, from the United Kingdom across Europe all the way to Sweden, down to Australia and New Zealand. And yet here we are in South Africa, still in debate, still taking oral submissions in Parliament and still trying to see if this might work in a South African context. We are so far behind the rest of the world, Leander, that it's actually embarrassing that we have some of the world's finest talent and storytellers, some of the world's finest technical crew and locations, and we are celebrated for our work ethic, and we are still discussing whether actors should be earning royalties.
Yeah.
So it's this is something that could potentially change the game, and it would be historic because it would be the very first time in South African history that South African actors could be allowed to earn royalties as a residual income.
One is tempted to breathe a sigh of relief, but the sense I'm getting from you is not just yet. It's a step in the right direction, but not necessarily at our destination yet. Do you get the sense that the Portfolio Committee, though, has a grasp of the needs of actors in our country?
We're deeply concerned, Leander, because this isn't our first time around the block with this Portfolio Committee. The constituent members, as you know, are a multi-party group that constitute the Portfolio Committee. And this is not the same group that we encountered 3 years ago when we first brought our submissions to Parliament to explain our situation. The submissions that we made in 2017, 2018 seem not to have been carried forward. And this raises concerns for us that we are now talking about legal principles, principles in copyright, principles in royalties, that this current Portfolio Committee may not have had a sufficient grounding in. So I don't doubt that they're going to be doing their homework, certainly, but will they be going back 3 or 4 years in order to look at our submissions then? From our submission 2 days ago, it was clear that based on the questions that they were asking us, that they didn't know that South African performers are contracted as freelancers. And that immediately raised red flags for us.
In a context where perhaps they actually are working from a basis of ignorance, I mean, I can guess ways through which you could complicate the process, but let me hear it from you. In what ways could things go wrong simply because, if you like, the decision makers aren't clued up, about what needs to happen?
Worst case scenario is that this entire process is canned. We are already looking at this bill having been rescinded. So we followed a wonderful path towards progressing and having these bills signed into law. And that was in November of 2018 when the National Assembly signed the bills. It went forward again until the National Council of Provinces in March of 2019 signed the bills and ratified them. It then went to the President's desk, where we were expecting that he would then take the advice of the two houses of Parliament, sign them into law, and then trigger the process of drafting regulations to the various amendments. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. What he did, in fact, was to sit with the bills for 15 months before blind essay actually compelled him to deliver on his mandates and actually decide whether there were constitutional conflicts or whether he would actually do something about them. As it happened, he remitted the bills to the Portfolio Committee, so he felt that there were constitutional concerns and sent them back. And that started a downhill slide. And we are absolutely afraid. This is our big concern, and we have huge anxiety about this, that the bills are now going to go back redrafted. And of course, there are many parties that are calling for that. Those are the parties who earn profits from the work of actors and the continued exploitation of our work. These are the broadcasters. These are the outside entities, the major studios that are based in the US, the major publishing houses based in the EU countries. They are all in Parliament right now lodging their objections to the bills and South African progress.
Are you afraid of the possible, call it, backlash from the bills passing? Backlash is not really the term I'm looking for, but the unintended consequences that may come as a result of the bills being finalized. And by that I mean, are these production companies that you've just mentioned threatening that work might be reduced if these bills actually come into law? And do you actually reckon that something like that could happen?
It was a threat that we had foreseen. And in fact, it was a threat that we had heard, if you remember, going back to the days of when antiretrovirals were being made available at huge and exorbitant costs, where international pharmaceutical companies were basically price gouging and forcing South Africans to pay in rates that could never be sustained. So this is something that South African people are used to hearing by the international communities, saying, we will place embargoes on you, we will stop trading with you. It's come up time and time again in the context of the Copyright Act as well and the Copyright Amendment Bill. So we are used to hearing these threats. We don't believe that they should be taken seriously because most countries across the US and in Europe love the fact that they have an advantage in currency when trading in South Africa, and they know that they're dealing with South African excellence. So I don't take it seriously at all, but of course there are those in Parliament who have a duty to hear that side of the story. And quite whether they take it seriously or not is another question. But these are the threats that we continue to hear. It's a way of applying pressure on South Africa, and it's a way of stopping the South African project to transform our various sectors, particularly the creative sector.
Absolutely. At the heart of it, of course, is the issue around livelihoods, specifically for actors. And we've seen, even in our recent past, really iconic actors in this country dying with little, if anything at all. Help us understand the sense of urgency specifically for actors to see this process through and have these bills finally in action.
Here's a perspective, and you have the Performance Protection Act from 1967. This is a 54-year-old act. You've got the Copyright Act from 1978. Both these pieces of legislation are so old that they failed to keep track of improvements in technology. If you remember, and I don't know how far back you can remember, but in my days when I was a youth, we'd watch home movies on 16mm film. And it was only years later that we progressed to VHS. And from VHS to DVD. From DVD, we went into the world of the internet and YouTube and streaming services. So even though technology has improved exponentially, and there are more ways now than ever before of viewing film and TV content, legislation has failed to keep track of technology. We have failed to take due note and to respect the rights of performers and creatives, and we are looking to both these bills to create the kind of regulatory framework that we need. And if we don't do it now, and this is the point, then we're not going to see that progress in our lifetimes. If we haven't done it in 54 years, Ayanda, it's not going to happen while you and I are alive. This is the window of opportunity. It needs to be taken with all seriousness. We need to start saving lives. We need to show respect to those performers who have gone before, who have established a long body of work and a tremendous legacy that we have failed up to this point to honor for them and their families to earn by the exploitation of their work.
You're absolutely right. It's taken a long time to get here. From your vantage point, how much longer do you reckon it might get until we finally do what you've just described, honor the legacies of the many actors who have given so much to this country?
It starts with amending the laws. It starts with the portfolio committee that are seized right now with looking at the various submissions, both written and oral, from all the parties who are considered to be important stakeholders in the sector, we can only hope that they will apply their minds in all seriousness and that we cannot afford delays any longer. Yesterday, you had a particularly moving submission by veteran and iconic performer Mara Lowe, who described her 40 years in the industry and the fact that even now, in the twilight of her career, being nearly 70 years old, seeing the death of so many of her contemporaries, is she the next to go? And this now sits with Parliament.
Sure. Thanks for that, Jack. Really do appreciate your time here on the AM Report. Hopefully from your lips to parliamentarians' ears, and more importantly, hopefully it gets the kind of outcome I think many of us are hoping for. That's Jack Devnarain. He's, of course, the chair of the South African Actors Guild. And we really do appreciate their time here on the AM Report.